The screech of tires against wet asphalt cut through the Manhattan evening like a knife. Sarah Martinez threw herself backward against the cold brick wall. As the yellow taxi missed her by inches, the driver's angry horn blaring as he sped past without even slowing down. "Watch where you're going. You crazy!" The driver's voice faded into the symphony of New York traffic, leaving Sarah pressed against the wall of the abandoned storefront, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. She looked down at the cardboard sign that had been knocked from her hands, now lying in a puddle that reflected the neon glow of the deli across the street. The careful letters she'd written that morning were already bleeding into illegible smears. "Anything helps. God bless. Thank you. 17 years old and 8 months on the streets." This was her life now. Sarah bent down to retrieve the soggy cardboard, her fingers numb from the December cold that seemed to seep through every layer of clothing she owned, which wasn't much. A thin jacket she'd found behind a Goodwill store, jeans with holes in both knees, and sneakers held together with duct tape and hope. The woman walking past clutched her designer purse tighter and quickened her pace, as if poverty might be contagious. The businessman behind her was already crossing to the other side of the street before he even reached Sarah's corner. This was the dance she knew by heart now, the careful choreography of urban invisibility, where eye contact was avoided at all costs and human beings could become as transparent as ghosts. "Excusez-moi, mademoiselle," came a voice from beside her. Sarah looked up, startled. A middle-aged man in an expensive coat was standing there, speaking French with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. He had kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and unlike everyone else who'd passed her corner that day, he was actually looking at her, seeing her. "Vous parlez français?" he asked gently. "Do you speak French?" For a moment, Sarah just stared. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her in anything other than dismissive English, or more often, not spoken to her at all. The French felt like a key turning in a lock she'd forgotten existed. "Oui, je parle français," she replied automatically, her accent flawless despite months of disuse. "Mais pourquoi me demandez-vous cela?" "Yes, I speak French. But why are you asking me that?" The man's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Her pronunciation was perfect, not just conversational, but genuinely fluent. "Forgive me," he continued. "In English, I'm Marcus Chen. I own a company nearby, and I heard you speaking to yourself earlier. You were switching between languages." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. She hadn't realized anyone was listening. Sometimes when the loneliness became too much, she would practice conversations in different languages, imaginary dialogues with imaginary people who cared enough to listen. It was a habit that helped keep her mind sharp and gave her something to focus on besides the gnawing hunger in her stomach. "I'm sorry if I was being too loud," she said quietly, looking down at her ruined sign. No, you weren't loud at all. I was just impressed. How many languages do you speak?" The question hung in the air between them. Sarah had learned long ago that being different made you a target, whether in foster homes or on the streets. But something in Marcus's tone, genuine curiosity rather than mockery, made her want to answer honestly. "9, she said, barely above a whisper. "9? Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice as if they were sharing a secret. "Which ones?" Sarah glanced around nervously. The evening rush was picking up, streams of people flowing around them like water around stones. English, Spanish, French, Mandarin, Arabic, Portuguese, Russian, German, and Italian. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. In his 15 years running an international tech company, he'd met plenty of polyglots, but most of them were highly educated professionals with advanced degrees and expensive language training. This girl, who couldn't be more than 18, was sitting on a street corner with everything she owned in a backpack, speaking 9 languages fluently. That's incredible," he said. "How did you learn them all?" The simple question opened a floodgate Sarah hadn't expected. Maybe it was the cold, or the exhaustion, or just the novelty of someone treating her like a human being worth talking to. But she found herself answering. "Foster care system," she said, settling back against the brick wall. "I was in the system for 10 years, moved around a lot. Some families spoke Spanish at home, some Mandarin. One family was Russian immigrants who barely knew English. You pick it up fast when it's the difference between fitting in and being completely isolated. Marcus crouched down so they were at eye level, ignoring the expensive suit that was now touching the dirty sidewalk. 10 years in foster care. My mom died when I was 7. Cancer. No other family anyone could find. So, Sarah shrugged, as if the fundamental tragedy of her childhood was just a minor inconvenience. You learn to adapt. Languages were just part of adapting. What about the others? Arabic, Portuguese, German, YouTube University. Sarah said with a slight smile, the first one Marcus had seen from her. Libraries have free internet. I'd watch movies with subtitles, listen to music, find conversation practice videos. German was because I loved this band called Rammstein. Arabic because I met this guy from Syria at a shelter who taught me some phrases. And I got curious about the whole language. And Italian. Cooking shows. Sarah's smile widened a fraction. I used to dream about being a chef someday. Italian cooking shows are the best, all that passion and emotion in every word. Bello, magnifico, perfetto. You can feel the love they put into their food just by listening to how they talk about it. Marcus found himself smiling back. Do you still want to be a chef? The light in Sarah's eyes dimmed. Hard to dream about cooking when you're not sure where your next meal is coming from. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was this brilliant, gifted young woman, more talented than half the people in his company, and she was worried about basic survival. When did you last eat? He asked gently. Sarah's jaw tightened. I'm not looking for a handout. I'm not offering one. I'm asking a question. They stared at each other for a moment. Two strangers sizing each other up on a busy Manhattan street corner. Finally, Sarah's defenses cracked just enough. Yesterday morning. A bagel from that place on 42nd. Day old. But the guy there sometimes gives them away instead of throwing them out. Jesus, Marcus breathed. Come on. He stood up and extended his hand to her. Sarah looked at it suspiciously. Where? To get some food and to talk. About what? Marcus paused, trying to find the right words. About why someone with your abilities is sitting on a street corner instead of changing the world. Sarah didn't take his hand, but she did stand up, slinging her worn backpack over her shoulder. You don't know me. You don't know anything about me. You're right, Marcus agreed. But I know talent when I see it. And I know waste when I see it too. Right now, you're both. It should have been insulting, but somehow it wasn't. There was no condescension in his voice. No pity, just a matter-of-fact observation that cut straight to the heart of Sarah's frustration. With her own life, they walked in silence for 3 blocks, past the evening rush of commuters heading home to warm apartments and hot dinners. Marcus led her to a small Italian restaurant tucked between a dry cleaner and a cell phone repair shop, the kind of place that looked unremarkable from the outside, but smelled like heaven itself. Duda voli, per favor, Marcus said to the hostess. In Italian, 2 tables, please. The hostess responded in rapid Italian, and Marcus replied smoothly. Sarah found herself listening to the rhythm of their conversation, picking up every word even though she remained silent. You understood all of that, Marcus said as they were seated. It wasn't a question. She asked if you wanted the usual table. You said yes. She mentioned that the osso buco is particularly good tonight, and you said you'd keep that in mind. Sarah picked up the menu, grateful to have something to do with her hands. Your accent is pretty good, but you learned it as an adult, right? There's a slight Mandarin influence in your vowels. Marcus stared at her. How could you possibly know that? You roll your R's just a tiny bit differently than native speakers, and earlier, when you switched from French to English, you had the same thing, very fluent, but there were microscopic hesitations that suggested you were translating in your head rather than thinking directly in French. You picked all that up from a few sentences. Sarah shrugged. Languages are like music. Everyone has their own rhythm, their own way of hitting the notes. When you really listen, you can hear where someone learned to sing. The waiter appeared, speaking in Italian. Without thinking, Sarah responded fluently, ordering the pasta special and explaining that her friend would need a few more minutes to decide. The waiter grinned and replied with something that made Sarah laugh, actually laugh. a sound so rare and genuine that it made Marcus's chest tight. "What did he say?" Marcus asked after the waiter left. "He said I have a beautiful Roman accent and asked if I'd studied in Italy." I told him no, just movies and music. He said I should visit Rome someday, that I'd fall in love with it. "Would you want to visit Rome?" Sarah's expression grew wistful. I used to have this whole plan mapped out. All the places I wanted to see, the languages I wanted to practice with native speakers. Rome, Barcelona, Beijing, Moscow, Cairo. I had this crazy idea that I could be a translator or an interpreter, work for the United Nations or something, travel the world, help people, communicate with each other. What happened to that plan? Reality happened. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact, but Marcus could hear the pain underneath. Hard to plan for the future when you're just trying to survive today. The food arrived, and Marcus watched Sarah try to eat slowly, with dignity, even though it was obvious she was starving. She kept glancing around the restaurant as if she couldn't quite believe she was allowed to be there. "Tell me about the foster homes," Marcus said gently. "What was that like?" Sarah set down her fork, considering whether to answer. There was something about this man Marcus that made her want to talk. Maybe it was the way he asked questions, like he actually cared about the answers, or maybe it was just that it had been so long since anyone had asked about her life as if it mattered. There were 7 different homes over 10 years. She began slowly. Some were better than others. The Rodriguez family was good. They really tried. That's where I learned Spanish properly. Mrs. Rodriguez would only speak Spanish in the house because she wanted her kids to stay connected to their heritage. I picked it up in about 6 months. What happened there? Mr. Rodriguez lost his job, and they couldn't afford to keep fostering. I understood, but Sarah paused, twirling pasta around her fork. It's hard when you finally start to feel like you belong somewhere, and then you have to leave again. And the others? The Chen's no relation to you. I assume they spoke Mandarin at home, really strict about education, which I actually loved. They had me in advanced classes, encouraged me to study hard. I thought maybe they'd adopt me, but they didn't. Sarah's laugh was bitter. Their biological son got into some trouble, drugs, stealing. They decided they needed to focus on their real family. I was just extra. Marcus felt anger rising in his chest, not at Sarah, but at a system that had failed her so completely, at families who had treated this remarkable girl as disposable. The Russian family was the Volkovs, Sarah continued. They were actually refugees themselves. Came here when I was about 14. They barely spoke English, so I had to learn Russian just to communicate. That one was tough because I was the translator for everything: doctor's appointments, parent-teacher conferences, dealing with landlords. I was 14 years old, and I was handling adult responsibilities because I was the only one in the house who could navigate both languages. That's a lot of pressure for a kid. Yeah, but it taught me something important. Sarah met his eyes. Languages aren't just about words. They're about understanding people, their fears, their hopes, their stories. When I was translating for Mrs. Volkova at the doctor's office, I wasn't just converting Russian words to English. I was helping her explain that she was terrified because in her country, doctors were people you couldn't trust. I was helping the doctor understand that her suspicion wasn't rudeness, it was survival. Marcus found himself leaning forward, completely absorbed in her story. What happened with them? Immigration issues. They got deported when I was 16. I had 3 weeks to find a new placement. And the last family, Sarah's expression darkened. The Johnsons, they took in foster kids for the monthly payments. Nothing more. 5 kids in a 3-bedroom house, and we were basically unpaid labor. Cook, clean, take care of the younger kids. I lasted 8 months. What happened? They told everyone I was 18 so they could kick me out and still collect payments for a few more months. Forged some paperwork, made it look official. By the time I could prove I was still 17, I was already on the streets. And honestly, Sarah took a shaky breath. I was so tired of fighting, so tired of being passed around like a problem no one wanted to solve permanently. How long have you been on your own? 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. The precision of her answer revealed how carefully she'd been counting. You learn the streets fast when you have to, where the good shelters are, which restaurants throw out food that's still edible, what neighborhoods are safe to sleep in, and the languages. How have you kept them up? Sarah's face brightened slightly. Books, mostly. Libraries are amazing. They're warm, they're free, and they have books in every language you can imagine. I volunteer sometimes, helping with translation, services for immigrants who need help with forms or appointments. It keeps my skills sharp and makes me feel useful, I guess. Marcus sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by the story he'd just heard. This wasn't just a sad tale of a kid failed by the system. This was a brilliant, resilient, extraordinary young woman who had turned every obstacle into an opportunity to grow stronger and more capable. Sarah, he said carefully, what would you say if I told you I might have a job for you? Her fork stopped halfway to her mouth. What kind of job? I run a tech company called Meridian Technologies. We work with clients all over the world: China, Spain, Germany, Italy, Brazil, Russia, several Middle Eastern countries. We're constantly hiring translators and interpreters for meetings, document translation, cultural consulting. I don't have a college degree, Sarah said quickly. I don't have certifications. Or do you think that woman at the doctor's office cared about Mrs. Volkova's translator's certifications? Or did she care that someone could help her understand what her patient was trying to say? Sarah stared at him. You're serious, dead serious. What you have isn't something you can learn in a classroom. You have intuitive understanding of language and culture that comes from lived experience. You understand what it means to be an outsider trying to communicate, trying to be understood. But I don't have an address or a phone or interview clothes. Or, Sarah's voice was rising with panic. Sarah. Marcus's voice was gentle but firm. Those are logistics, problems we can solve. The question is, do you want the job? For a long moment, Sarah just stared at him, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of cruel joke. She'd been disappointed so many times, had so many promises broken, that hope felt dangerous. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for a stranger? Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about how to answer honestly. Because 3 years ago, my company almost lost a major deal with a client in Tokyo. We had translators, good ones, but they kept missing cultural nuances that were killing the negotiations. Finally, we brought in this consultant, a woman who'd lived in Japan for 20 years, who understood not just the language but the culture, the unspoken rules, the way business relationships work there. He paused, remembering. She saved us millions of dollars, not because she was the most technically proficient translator, but because she understood people. She could read between the lines, anticipate misunderstandings before they happened, bridge gaps that pure language skills couldn't touch. And you think I could do that? I think you've been doing it your whole life. Every time you walked into a new foster home and had to figure out how to communicate, how to fit in, how to survive, you were reading cultural cues, adapting your communication style, building bridges between different worlds. Sarah felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. I don't know how to have a normal job. I don't know how to show up every day, how to work with other people. Neither did I when I started my company, Marcus interrupted gently. You know what I did know? I knew how to solve problems. I knew how to adapt. I knew how to work harder than anyone else, because I'd had to fight for everything I had. He leaned forward. Sarah, you've been running your own survival business. For 8 months, you've managed resources, assessed risks, adapted to changing circumstances, dealt with difficult people, maintained professional relationships with librarians and shelter workers and restaurant owners. You've done all of this while maintaining fluency in 9 languages and staying physically and mentally healthy enough to have this conversation with me. Sarah wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. When you put it like that, you're not broken, Marcus said firmly. You're not damaged goods that need fixing. You're a highly capable person who's been operating under impossible circumstances. Give you proper resources and support, and there's no limit to what you could accomplish. The waiter returned, asking in Italian if they wanted dessert. Without thinking, Sarah replied that they were fine, thank you, and asked for the check. After he left, she realized what she'd done. I've been talking for so long. I assumed you needed to get going. Sarah, Marcus said, it's 7:30 on a Thursday evening. I have nowhere else I need to be. And honestly, this has been the most interesting conversation I've had in months. Really, really. When was the last time you talked to someone who was genuinely curious about your thoughts, your experiences, your dreams? Sarah considered the question seriously. I honestly can't remember. Well, I'm curious. Tell me more about those travel dreams. If you could go anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would you go first for the next hour? Marcus listened as Sarah painted vivid pictures of the places she longed to see. She talked about wanting to practice her Arabic in the markets of Marrakesh, to test her Portuguese with families in the favelas of Rio, to see if her Russian was good enough to navigate the Moscow metro system. I have this fantasy, she said, her eyes bright with enthusiasm, where I'm working as a translator for the UN, and I'm in some crucial negotiation between countries that speak different languages, and I'm not just translating words, I'm helping them understand each other's perspectives, finding common ground they didn't know existed. That's not a fantasy, Marcus said. That's a career goal. Come on. People like me don't get jobs at the UN. People like you know, foster kids, street kids, people with no connections, no family. No, Sarah, stop. Marcus's voice was firm. You're not defined by your circumstances. You're defined by your choices, your character, your capabilities, and from what I've seen tonight, all three of those are exceptional. The restaurant was starting to empty out around them. Marcus signaled for the check, but made no move to rush their conversation. Can I ask you something? Sarah said. Of course. Why are you being so nice to me? I mean, really. People don't just offer jobs to homeless teenagers they meet on the street. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering how much to share. Can I tell you something about my own story? Sarah nodded. I wasn't homeless, but I wasn't far from it. My parents immigrated from Taiwan when I was 12. They spoke almost no English, worked 3 jobs between them just to keep us in a tiny apartment in Chinatown. I was the translator for everything: banks, schools, doctors, landlords. Sarah's eyes widened. The parallel was unmistakable. I know what it's like to feel responsible for more than you should at that age. I know what it's like to be the bridge between worlds, to carry the weight of other people's survival on your shoulders. But you succeeded. You built a company. I got lucky. Marcus interrupted. I had parents who sacrificed everything to make sure I could go to college. I had teachers who saw potential in me and pushed me toward opportunities. I had a system that, however imperfectly, gave me a path forward. He paused, meeting her eyes. You've had none of those advantages, and you've still managed to develop skills that most people with advanced degrees don't have. You've survived and thrived under conditions that would break most people. I don't feel like I've thrived, Sarah. You're 17 years old. You've been on your own for 8 months, and you're still fluent in 9 languages. You're still curious about the world, still dreaming about the future, still capable of sitting here having an intelligent conversation about culture and travel and career goals. If that's not thriving, I don't know what is. The waiter brought the check, and Marcus paid without letting Sarah see the total. As they prepared to leave, he pulled out his business card and wrote something on the back. This is my direct number, he said, handing it to her. I want you to think about what we've discussed tonight. Really think about it, okay? Sarah said quietly, staring down at the card. There's a hotel 2 blocks from here, the Meridian Inn. I'm going to call them and put you up for the night. Tomorrow, if you're interested, come to my office. We'll talk more seriously about what a job might look like. Sarah's head snapped up. I can't let you pay for a hotel room. It's not charity. Marcus said firmly. It's an investment. If you're going to work for my company, I need you rested, clean, and ready to perform at your best. Consider it a pre-employment benefit. They stood up, and Marcus watched Sarah carefully fold the business card and slip it into her jacket pocket, as if it were made of gold. As they walked toward the door, Sarah stopped suddenly. Marcus, yeah. What if I'm not as good as you think? I am. What if I disappoint you? Marcus smiled. Sarah, for the past 3 hours, you've demonstrated more intelligence, resilience, cultural awareness, and linguistic ability than most people I know. The only way you could disappoint me is if you don't give yourself the chance to find out what you're capable of outside the restaurant. The December wind felt less cutting than it had earlier. Sarah pulled her thin jacket tighter, but somehow, the cold didn't seem to reach as deep. "The hotel is that way," Marcus pointed. "Ask for the concierge. Tell them you're Sarah Martinez and that Marcus Chen made a reservation. They'll take care of you. What time should I come to your office tomorrow? Whenever you're ready." "But Sarah," Marcus paused, "don't overthink this. Don't spend all night coming up with reasons why it won't work. For once in your life, just let someone help you." As Marcus walked away, disappearing into the flow of evening pedestrians, Sarah stood on the sidewalk holding his business card and trying to process what had just happened. 3 hours ago, she'd been invisible, just another homeless kid that people stepped around on their way to somewhere more important. Now she was walking toward a hotel where someone was expecting her, where she would sleep in a real bed for the first time in 8 months, where she could take a hot shower and maybe, just maybe, start to believe that her life could be different. The hotel lobby was warm and bright, all marble and soft lighting, and the kind of quiet elegance that Sarah had only seen in movies. The concierge, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled genuinely when Sarah approached the desk. "You must be Miss Martinez," she said warmly. Mr. Chen called ahead. "We have a lovely room ready for you on the 8th floor." As Sarah followed the bellhop to the elevator, she caught sight of herself in the mirrored walls, thin, tired, wearing clothes that had seen better days. She looked exactly like what she was, a homeless teenager who didn't belong in a place like this. But for the first time in months, she also saw something else in her reflection: possibility. The room was small but perfect, with a bed that looked like a cloud and a bathroom with the kind of shower that promised unlimited hot water. Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing her coat, still holding Marcus's business card. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether to trust this stranger who had appeared in her life like something out of a fairy tale. Tomorrow, she would have to decide whether she was brave enough to hope again. But tonight, for the first time in 8 months, she was safe and warm and fed. And for now, that was enough. Sarah woke up at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before the alarm she'd set on the hotel's bedside clock. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, disoriented by the softness of the mattress beneath her and the absence of sirens, shouting, or the constant hum of traffic that usually served as her wake-up call on the streets. The events of the previous evening came flooding back like a dream she was afraid to fully remember. The conversation with Marcus, the restaurant, the business card that was still clutched in her hand from where she'd fallen asleep holding it. She sat up slowly, her body aching in unfamiliar ways. 8 months of sleeping on concrete and in doorways had trained her muscles to expect hardness, discomfort. The luxury of a real bed had left her feeling almost guilty, as if she'd stolen something that didn't belong to her. The shower was everything she'd imagined and more. Hot water cascaded over her for 20 full minutes while she used the hotel's expensive shampoo and soap, watching months of accumulated grime and exhaustion spiral down the drain. When she finally stepped out, the mirror was completely fogged, and for a moment she could pretend she was anyone, a normal teenager getting ready for school, a college student preparing for an interview, someone whose biggest worry was what to wear rather than where to sleep. But the reflection that emerged as the steam cleared told the truth. Her clothes, now clean but still threadbare and patched, hung loose on her too thin frame. Her dark hair, though freshly washed, needed a proper cut. She looked like exactly what she was, a homeless kid playing dress-up in a world she didn't belong to. The doubt crept in like fog rolling off the harbor. What was she thinking? Marcus Chen was a successful CEO who ran an international company. He lived in a world of board meetings and business deals, of people with college degrees and professional wardrobes and proper addresses. What could she possibly offer him besides a compelling sob story and a party trick with languages? Sarah sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed and pulled out Marcus's business card, reading it for the 100th time. Meridian Technologies was embossed in elegant silver letters, with an address in one of Manhattan's most prestigious business districts. Below that, Marcus's title, CEO and founder, on the back, in his careful handwriting. Sarah, sometimes the best opportunities come disguised as impossible chances. Don't let fear decide your future. She'd memorized those words during the sleepless hours before dawn, when the voices in her head had grown loudest with all the reasons this couldn't work. She had no resume, no references, no work history beyond odd jobs and survival. She had no permanent address, no professional clothes, no college education. She was a 17-year-old girl with nothing but languages in her head and hope in her heart. But those words, "Don't let fear decide your future," kept echoing like a challenge. At 7:30 a.m., Sarah made her way down to the hotel's breakfast area. The concierge from the night before, whose name tag read Patricia, smiled warmly when she saw her. "Good morning, Miss Martinez. How did you sleep? Better than I have in months." Sarah answered honestly. "Thank you. Mr. Chen called this morning," Patricia said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "He wanted to make sure you were comfortable and asked me to tell you there's no rush. Take your time this morning." The kindness in the woman's voice almost undid Sarah completely. When was the last time a stranger had shown her such gentle consideration? When was the last time anyone had thought about her comfort, her needs, her feelings? "Patricia," Sarah said impulsively, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, dear. Do you think people can really change their lives, like completely change them?" Patricia studied Sarah's face with the wisdom of someone who'd seen countless guests pass through the hotel's doors, business travelers and tourists, families on vacation and individuals running toward something or away from something else. "I think," Patricia said slowly, "that life has a funny way of putting the right people in front of us, exactly when we need them most. And I think that when those moments come, the question isn't whether we deserve them, it's whether we're brave enough to reach out and take them." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "What if I'm not brave enough?" "Honey," Patricia said gently, "you've been living on the streets for 8 months and you're still here, still hoping, still dreaming. If that's not brave, I don't know what is." By 9:15 a.m., Sarah was standing outside the gleaming glass tower that housed Meridian Technologies, craning her neck to count the floors that stretched up toward the cloudy December sky. The building's lobby was all polished marble and modern art, filled with people in sharp suits carrying expensive briefcases and talking rapidly into wireless earpieces. She felt like an alien who'd stumbled onto the wrong planet. The security guard at the front desk looked her up and down with barely concealed skepticism. When she said she had an appointment with Marcus Chen, Sarah watched him make a phone call, his eyebrows rising higher with each word he spoke. "Mr. Chen's assistant will be right down," he said, his tone suggesting this was highly irregular. 5 minutes later, a woman in her 40s approached with a warm smile and an air of competent professionalism that immediately put Sarah at ease. "You must be Sarah," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Jana Rodriguez, Mr. Chen's executive assistant. He's been looking forward to seeing you this morning." As they rode the elevator to the 34th floor, Jana made easy conversation about the weather and the city, treating Sarah as if she belonged there, as if there was nothing unusual about a homeless teenager coming to meet with the CEO of a major tech company. "Mr. Chen told me a little about your background," Jana said as they walked down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. 9 languages? That's remarkable, I guess, Sarah replied, still not quite believing this was happening. "Don't guess," Jana said firmly. "Own it. In this business, confidence is just as important as competence." Marcus's office was larger than any apartment Sarah had ever lived in, with windows that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. But what struck her most wasn't the size or the luxury, it was how lived in it felt. Books in multiple languages lined the shelves, family photos sat on his desk next to stacks of papers, and a world map on one wall was covered with different colored pins. "Sarah." Marcus stood up from behind his desk, and his smile was so genuine that some of her nervousness began to fade. "How did you sleep? Like the dead," she admitted, then blushed. "Sorry, that was honest." Marcus finished. "I like honest. Coffee. Jana makes the best coffee in Manhattan. I'd love some." "Thank you." As Jana prepared coffee at a small station near the windows, Marcus gestured for Sarah to sit in one of the comfortable chairs arranged around a low table. Instead of sitting behind his intimidating desk, he chose the chair across from her, creating an atmosphere of conversation rather than interrogation. "So," he said, settling back with his own cup, "have you thought about our conversation last night?" Sarah took a sip of coffee. It really was excellent, and gathered her courage. "I've thought about little else, but I have to be honest with you about something. I'm listening. I'm scared," she said simply. "I'm scared that you're offering me something I'm not qualified for, that I'll disappoint you, that this is all too good to be true, and I'll wake up back on the street corner." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "Those are reasonable fears. What else? I don't know how to be a normal employee. I don't know how to work in an office, how to interact with colleagues, how to belong in a place like this." Sarah gestured around the elegant office. "Look at me, Marcus. I'm wearing clothes I found in a dumpster, sitting in a chair. That probably costs more than most people make in a month." "Sarah," Marcus said gently, "can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I see someone who's survived impossible circumstances and emerged not bitter or broken, but curious and hopeful. I see someone who's mastered 9 languages through sheer determination and natural ability. I see someone who's developed incredible cultural sensitivity by necessity, who understands what it means to be an outsider trying to communicate across barriers." He paused, leaning forward. "But most importantly, I see someone who's honest about her fears instead of pretending they don't exist. Do you know how rare that is in business? How many people I meet who are so concerned with projecting an image of competence that they never admit when they don't know something? But competence is important in business, right? Competence can be taught," Marcus said. "Character can't. And you, Sarah Martinez, have more character than most people I know." Before Sarah could respond, Jana knocked on the door. "Marcus, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you have that call with the Tokyo office in 10 minutes. Can we reschedule it? It's the 3rd time we've rescheduled. They're expecting to finalize the Yamamoto contract today." Marcus looked frustrated. "This is exactly what I was talking about," he said to Sarah. "We've been trying to close this deal for 6 months, but there keep being miscommunications, cultural misunderstandings. Our translator is technically competent, but they don't understand the cultural context." Sarah finished. "Exactly." Marcus looked at her thoughtfully. "Sarah, how would you feel about sitting in on this call? Not as an employee, just as an observer. I'd love to get your perspective on where the communication is breaking down." Sarah's heart started racing. I don't know anything about business, deals or contracts. You don't need to. I need someone who understands people." 10 minutes later, Sarah found herself sitting in Meridian's main conference room, surrounded by Marcus and 3 other executives, staring at a large screen that showed for serious-looking Japanese businessmen in an office in Tokyo. The time difference meant it was nearly midnight there, but the Japanese team looked alert and professional. "Ohayo gozaimasu," Marcus began in carefully pronounced Japanese. "Good morning." The lead Japanese executive, Mr. Yamamoto, smiled politely and responded in English. "Good morning, Mr. Chen. We are ready to discuss the final terms of our agreement." For the next 20 minutes, Sarah watched as the 2 sides went through contract details, with Marcus's team making points in English and the Tokyo team responding thoughtfully, but with increasing stiffness. The company's regular translator, a competent woman named Linda, rendered everything accurately. But Sarah could see the growing tension on both sides. The breaking point came when Marcus's CFO, a blunt man named Dave, said something about needing ironclad guarantees on delivery schedules. Linda translated this directly into Japanese, and Sarah watched Mr. Yamamoto's expression tighten almost imperceptibly. During a brief break while the Tokyo team conferred among themselves, Sarah leaned over to Marcus. "Can I say something?" she whispered. Marcus nodded. The phrase ironclad guarantees, when Linda translated it, she used words that basically mean unbreakable chains of obligation. In Japanese business culture, that sounds like you don't trust them, like you're assuming they'll fail unless you force them to succeed. Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "What should we have said?" Something about mutual commitment to excellence or shared confidence in quality outcomes. Same meaning, but it positions you as partners working toward the same goal instead of adversaries where one side has to be forced to perform. When the call resumed, Marcus carefully rephrased the delivery requirements using Sarah's suggested approach. The change in the Japanese team's demeanor was immediate and dramatic. Mr. Yamamoto's shoulders relaxed, his smile became genuine, and suddenly, the conversation was flowing smoothly. "There's something else," Sarah whispered during another brief pause. "When they said we will consider your proposal carefully, they're not actually considering it. In Japanese business culture, that's a polite way of saying no. But if you acknowledge their concerns about the timeline and offer some flexibility there, I think they'll move forward." Marcus looked at her with something approaching awe. "How could you possibly know that?" Body language, tone of voice, the specific words they're choosing. It's like reading music. Every culture has its own rhythm. Following Sarah's advice, Marcus addressed the timeline concerns directly, offering a small adjustment that demonstrated respect for the Japanese team's perspective. Within 15 minutes, they had a handshake agreement on a deal worth $3 million. As the call ended and the screen went dark, the conference room fell silent. Marcus's three executives were staring at Sarah with expressions ranging from amazement to skepticism. "That was," Dave began. "Incredible," finished Linda, the translator. "I've been doing this for 12 years, and I completely missed those cultural cues." "It's not your fault," Sarah said quickly. "You translated everything perfectly. I've spent my whole life learning to read between the lines of what people are really saying." Marcus stood up slowly. "Sarah, that deal has been stalled for 6 months. 6 months. And you just helped us close it in 20 minutes. I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did." Marcus's voice was firm. "You did something that all the technical training in the world can't teach. You understood what people needed to hear, not just what they were saying." After the other executives left, Marcus and Sarah returned to his office. Jana brought fresh coffee and quietly closed the door behind her. "Well," Marcus said, settling back in his chair, "I think it's safe to say you passed the audition." Sarah stared at him. "That was an audition, the best kind, real world, high stakes, with actual consequences." Marcus grinned. "And you just helped close one of the biggest deals of our year. So, you're really offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a career, Sarah. The question is whether you're ready to accept it." For a long moment, Sarah sat in silence, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there was the street corner where she'd spent yesterday evening, the world where she was invisible and disposable. And here, in this office 40 floors above that reality, someone was offering her a chance to build something entirely different. What would the job actually involve? She asked. "Initially, you'd work as a cultural consultant and interpreter for our international clients. We'd start you at $55,000 a year with full benefits. Jana would help you get set up with an apartment, a phone, everything you need to get started." Sarah's breath caught. $55,000, that's just the starting salary. "Based on what I saw in that conference room, I suspect you'll be moving up quickly." "But I'm only 17. I don't have a high school diploma. I don't have." Sarah. Marcus interrupted gently. "You just demonstrated skills that most MBA graduates don't have. You think any of our clients are going to care about a diploma when you're helping them close million-dollar deals? What about the legal issues? You said yesterday that hiring someone without documentation would be complicated." Marcus smiled. "Jana spent this morning on the phone with our legal team and HR department. There are programs for exactly your situation, emancipated minors who need employment authorization. It'll take a few weeks to get everything processed, but it's absolutely doable. And until then, you work as a paid consultant while we get the paperwork sorted out. Full pay, full support, full investment in your future." Sarah felt tears building again. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, looking out at the city below. "Can I tell you about the day I decided to start this company?" Sarah nodded. "I was 25, working for a big corporation that treated me like a disposable asset. I was good at my job, but I didn't have the right connections, the right background, the right pedigree. I watched less capable people get promoted above me because they went to the right schools or had family connections in the industry. He turned back to her. One day, my boss basically told me I'd never advance beyond middle management because I didn't fit the culture, and I realized that I had two choices: accept that limitation or create my own culture where talent and character mattered more than background and connections. So you started Meridian. So I started Meridian. And from day one, I promised myself that if I ever had the chance to give someone the opportunity that nobody gave me, I wouldn't hesitate. Marcus leaned forward. Sarah, you're not a charity case. You're not someone I'm helping out of pity. You're exactly the kind of person I want to build this company with, someone who's earned everything they have, who understands what it means to fight for opportunities, who brings a perspective that can't be bought or taught. But what if I fail? What if I can't handle it? Then we'll figure it out together. But Sarah, Marcus's voice was firm. Based on everything I've seen from you, failure isn't something you need to worry about. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where she'd been sitting 24 hours earlier. The distance seemed impossible to measure, not just the physical height, but the gulf between the girl who'd been begging for change and the young woman being offered a career. There's one more thing, she said without turning around. What's that? I want to finish high school. I know it might not matter for the job, but it matters to me. Of course, Jana can help you get enrolled in a program that'll work with your schedule. A lot of working adults finish their diplomas that way. Sarah turned back to face him. And I want to take college classes eventually. Maybe study linguistics formally, or international business, or I don't know yet, but I want to keep learning. Marcus's smile was radiant. Sarah, any company that would discourage an employee from continuing their education isn't worth working for. We'll support whatever educational goals you want to pursue, okay? Sarah said quietly, okay, I accept your offer. Marcus stood up and extended his hand for a formal handshake. Welcome to Meridian Technologies, Sarah Martinez. As their hands met, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest, a feeling she barely recognized because it had been absent for so long. Security, belonging, the solid ground of having a place in the world that was hers by right, not by charity. What happens now? She asked. Now, Jana takes you shopping for some work clothes company expense. Tomorrow, you start learning our systems and meeting your new colleagues. Next week, you find an apartment. Next month, you get your first paycheck. Marcus paused, his expression growing serious. But most importantly, Sarah, you start building the life you want instead of just surviving the one you have. As Sarah left the Meridian Technologies building 3 hours later, her arms full of shopping bags and her pocket containing a company credit card, a set of keys to a furnished studio apartment, and a signed employment contract, she felt like she was walking in a dream. The street corner where she'd spent the previous evening was only 6 blocks away, but it might as well have been on another planet. She walked past it slowly, looking at the spot where she'd sat with her cardboard sign, where Marcus Chen had stopped to ask her about languages. A different homeless man was sitting there now, holding his own sign, invisible to the stream of pedestrians flowing around him. Sarah reached into her purse. She had a purse now, bought that afternoon, and pulled out a $20 bill. Excuse me, she said, crouching down beside him. The man looked up, suspicious and wary. I'm not trying to preach or save you, Sarah said gently. I just wanted you to know that sometimes the impossible happens. Sometimes someone stops and sees you. She pressed the 20 into his hand. Don't give up, okay? As she walked away, Sarah heard him call after her. Hey, lady, what's your story? She turned back with a smile. I'm still writing it. That night, in her new apartment, small but clean and safe, and hers, Sarah sat on the single bed and looked around at her new life. Tomorrow, she would put on the professional clothes hanging in her closet and go to work at a job that valued her skills and respected her intelligence. She would help people communicate across cultures and languages, building bridges between different worlds. But tonight, she called the one person who needed to hear about her transformation. Patricia, she said when the hotel concierge answered. "It's Sarah Martinez. I wanted to thank you for what you said this morning about being brave enough to reach out." "Oh, honey," Patricia's voice was warm with delight. "How did it go?" "I got the job. I got an apartment. I got a future. I'm so proud of you, dear. But can I tell you something?" "What's that?" "You didn't get those things. You earned them. There's a difference." As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized Patricia was right. This wasn't luck or charity or a fairy tale rescue. This was what happened when preparation met opportunity, when talent was finally given a chance to flourish, when someone was brave enough to take the hand that was extended. Outside her window, Manhattan glittered in the darkness, full of millions of stories and dreams and possibilities, and for the first time in her 17 years, Sarah Martinez knew that her story was just beginning. Incredible. Can you believe Sarah's transformation? From homeless to hired in just 24 hours. But here's what's even more amazing. This story is based on real events that happen every day. When people are brave enough to see past circumstances to potential. Drop a comment below. What would you do if someone offered to change your life completely? Would you be brave enough to say yes? Smash that subscribe button and share this story.